Video 21, Part 3B of 25, Inputs to the Plan Scope Management Plan Process. The purpose of this video is to develop a WBS to present the inputs to the Plan Scope Management Plan process. Please click the like button, subscribe to my channel and share with others. Thank you. The Plan Scope Management Plan process is the first process in the Project Scope Management knowledge area and is related to the Planning Process Group. The project charter is the first input to the Plan Scope Management process. The project charter is a critical input to the Plan Scope Management process in project management because it provides the foundational information needed to define and manage the project scope effectively. The reasons why the project charter is important to the Plan Scope Management process are: 1. Provides high-level project description. The project charter includes the project's objectives, deliverables, and high-level requirements, which help guide the development of the scope management plan. Without the project charter, the project team would lack clarity on what needs to be included in the scope management plan. 2. Defines project boundaries. It outlines the preliminary project scope statement, helping to establish initial boundaries and constraints, which are refined during scope planning. The project charter outlines assumptions, constraints, and risks that may affect scope definition and control. For example, budget or timeline constraints will shape how scope is managed. 3. Identifies key stakeholders and authority. The charter lists key stakeholders and the project sponsor, whose expectations must be considered when defining scope management processes. This helps in determining who should be involved in scope planning and validation. 4. Contains approval requirements. The charter formally authorizes the project and gives the project manager the authority to plan and execute scope-related activities. Since the charter is formally approved, it ensures that scope decisions align with the stakeholder expectations and organizational goals that is defined by the business case. 5. Sets the foundation for scope baseline. The project charter's deliverables and success criteria help in developing the detailed project scope statement, work breakdown structure, and ultimately the scope baseline. 6. Guides scope management approach. The charter's high-level details help in developing the scope management plan, which defines: first, how scope will be defined. This can be defined through requirements documentation, workshops, and similar approaches. Second, how the work breakdown structure will be created. Third, how scope changes will be controlled. It is important to note that the charter's constraints and assumptions influence whether the scope will be managed predictively or adaptively. In conclusion, the project charter is essential because it ensures that scope management aligns with the project's approved objectives and stakeholder expectations. Without it, scope planning would lack direction, leading to potential misalignment, scope creep, or project failure. Question: what is the importance of the project management plan input to the plan scope management process? The project management plan is a critical input to the plan scope management process because it provides the foundational framework and guidelines for how project scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. Key reasons the project management plan is vital to plan scope management. 1. Provides baseline references. The project management plan includes baselines, such as scope baseline, schedule baseline, and cost baseline. All these baselines influence how scope will be managed. The scope baseline, if it exists from prior planning, helps ensure consistency in defining new scope requirements. 2. Defines project execution approach. The development approach, which may be predictive, agile, or hybrid, outlined in the project management plan determines how the scope will be developed. It can be detailed up front or iteratively. For example, an agile project may use a product backlog instead of a traditional scope statement. 3. Influences constraints and assumptions. The plan includes constraints, such as budget and deadlines, and assumptions that shape scope decisions. Example, a fixed budget may limit scope expansion. 4. Aligns with other management plans. The schedule, cost, quality, risk, and stakeholder management plans impact how scope is defined and controlled. Example, a tight schedule may require stricter scope change controls. 5. Governance and change control. The change management plan, part of the project management plan, defines how scope changes will be reviewed and approved. Ensures scope management aligns with overall project governance. 6. Stakeholder expectations and communication. The stakeholder engagement plan helps identify whose input is needed for scope definition, ensuring alignment with expectations. We will now present the components of the project management plan that are most relevant for scope management. 1. Scope baseline, containing the project scope statement, the WBS, and the WBS dictionary. 2. Schedule and cost baselines. This will avoid gold plating or unrealistic scope. 3. Change management plan. It guides how scope changes are handled. 4. Requirements management plan. It guides how requirements will be collected and tracked. 5. Development approach. The projects can follow different development approaches, including predictive or agile. In conclusion, the project management plan ensures that scope management is integrated, consistent, and aligned with the project's overall objectives, constraints, and stakeholder needs. Without it, scope planning could be disjointed, leading to scope creep, misalignment, or project failure. The third input to the plan scope management process is the enterprise environmental factors. Question: how important is the input of information about enterprise environmental factors to the plan scope management process? The enterprise environmental factors are a critical input to the plan scope management process because they provide the external and internal conditions that influence how project scope is defined, controlled, and managed. Here's why they're important. 1. Organizational culture and structure. Enterprise environmental factors show that the way an organization operates, such as centralized versus decentralized or matrixed versus functional, affects scope planning and management. They also show how stakeholder expectations and governance models shape scope documentation. 2. Marketplace conditions and industry standards. Enterprise environmental factors show how regulatory requirements, compliance standards, and industry best practices, such as Agile versus Waterfall, influence scope planning. They also show how competitor benchmarks may affect project deliverables. 3. Existing infrastructure and tools. Enterprise environmental factors show how the availability of project management software, such as Jira or MS Project, impacts how scope is tracked. They also show how historical data from past projects helps in defining realistic scope boundaries. 4. Legal and contractual constraints. Enterprise environmental factors show how government regulations, intellectual property laws, or contractual obligations can limit or define scope. They also show how procurement policies can affect how vendors contribute to scope. 5. Resource availability and capabilities. Enterprise environmental factors show how the project team's skills, such as expertise in requirements gathering, affect scope planning. They also show how physical resources, such as facilities and technology, can constrain or enable scope options. 6. Stakeholder expectations and risk appetite. Enterprise environmental factors show how customer demands, market trends, and risk tolerance levels shape scope definition. They also show how high-risk projects may require more detailed scope controls. And now an important question arises. How do enterprise environmental factors influence planned scope management? 1. Enterprise environmental factors help tailor the scope management plan to fit organizational needs. 2. Enterprise environmental factors guide the selection of requirements gathering techniques, such as workshops or surveys. 3. Enterprise environmental factors determine the level of flexibility, such as rigid scope in construction versus adaptive in software. In conclusion, enterprise environmental factors ensure that scope management aligns with real-world constraints and opportunities, making them a foundational input for effective scope planning. Ignoring them can lead to unrealistic scope definitions, stakeholder conflicts, or project failure. The fourth input to the planned scope management process is the organizational process assets. And the first question is, how important is the input of organizational process assets to the planned scope management process? The input of organizational process assets is extremely important to the planned scope management process because it provides the foundational structure, historical knowledge, and standardized practices necessary to define and control project scope effectively. And the reasons why organizational process assets are extremely important to the planned scope management process are: 1. Ensures consistency and efficiency. Organizational process assets include templates, such as scope management plans, WBS examples, and requirements documents. These templates help because they save time and ensure uniformity across projects. Organizational process assets also include standardized processes, such as how to collect requirements and how to handle scope changes. They prevent ambiguity and reduce risks. 2. Leverages past experience. Organizational process assets include historical records, such as lessons learned, past scope documents, and change logs. They help avoid previous mistakes and adopt proven strategies. Organizational process assets include benchmarking data from similar projects aids in realistic scope planning. 3. Supports compliance and governance. Organizations often have mandatory policies, such as regulatory requirements and approval workflows. They must be followed when defining scope. Enterprise environmental factors, such as company culture and stakeholder expectations, influence how scope is structured. 4. Enhances decision-making. Financial and resource data from past projects help in setting realistic scope boundaries. Approved tools and techniques, such as requirements gathering methods and scope tracking software, streamline the process. 5. Reduces scope creep and rework. Clearly documented change control procedures help manage scope adjustments systematically. Predefined acceptance criteria ensure deliverables meet organizational standards. Now we have the following question. What are the consequences of ignoring organizational process assets? Without leveraging organizational process assets, the planned scope management process may 1. Lack structure, leading to poorly defined scope. 2. It may repeat past mistakes, increasing risks. 3. It may face delays due to inconsistent or ad hoc processes. 4. It may struggle with stakeholder alignment due to non-compliance with organizational norms. In conclusion, organizational process assets are critical because they provide the necessary framework, historical insights, and best practices to ensure scope is planned effectively, minimizing risks and maximizing project success. This video is finished. In the next videos, we will find 1. Creation of WBS for different projects using WBS Schedule Pro. 2. Examples of project plans using MS Project. And many more videos. Don't forget to give a thumbs up if you like this video and want us to continue with new topics. Subscribe to the channel. All content is free. You can also comment suggesting topics you would like to see on this channel. Thank you.